While people are filtering in, what, just for the attendees that are here, starting with you, Estella, it's no guess what instrument you play, but what instrument do you play? How long have you been playing it?
I play trumpet, obviously, and I've been playing for 20 years.
Callie, you're next.
I don't know if you can see the poster behind me. That's my horn quartet. I play French horn, and I've also been playing 20-ish years on the French horn. But I was a trumpet transplant, so I started on the trumpet, and then I switched to horn later.
And Beth Malavance.
I play trumpet and cornet, mostly cornet these days, and I've been playing maybe 20, if my math is right, maybe 23 years.
And Kalia?
So I play trombone, and I've been playing for about 15 years. Yeah.
And you're an excellent composer, and I mean, every single time I look at your page, it's like you're adding one more thing onto your...
I try to do it all. I'm trying at least.
Kate Amrine. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
It's technically Amrine.
Amrine, sorry.
All good. I'm Kate. I play trumpet. You can sort of see a lit trumpet behind me. Lots of mutes, though.
I was going to say the bookshelf of mutes gives it away.
Yeah. I've also been playing for about 20 years.
Cool. And last but not least, Leslie Bonner.
I play trumpet, and I've been playing for about 16 years.
Actually, I can introduce myself. My name's Mary Galimi, and I've been playing trumpet for probably 30 years now. Something like that. Maybe we'll say just under 30 years, so I don't feel so old. Can you guys hear me all right? All right, it's 7:02, so attendees will hopefully trickle in. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Some quick introduction to who we are. This is Denis Wick Products. It's hosting this chat. My name is Mary Galimi. I handle all things Denis Wick and the United States. In honor of Midwest Clinic, which is happening in Chicago during this week, we are hosting all these live discussions. So if you'd like to learn more about Midwest and visit our virtual booth, you can go to booth.danzer.com, and there's product information. There's a full list of all the live events that are happening. There's freebies, including the lovely background of mutes that you saw behind me. So if you go to our freebies section, you can download a bunch of different Zoom backgrounds. And then also another way to connect with us is off the Denis Wick app. It's basically our whole community put into one little app section. So our full product catalog, product information, if you've never searched for product before or mouthpieces terrify you as they did me for years, there's really good instruction on how to really tune into the right mouthpiece for yourself. You can see our whole list of artists. So if you want to learn more about the women in our artist group, you can go check out the artist pages. There's video clinics, there's podcasts, there's a blog. So there's really a lot going on there, and you can download that from the App Store and Google Play. So tonight's discussion is women in the brass industry. And I have been looking at the title Women in Brass for like 50 times a day. And by now I'm just like, why did I name it that? Because it just sounds so absurd to me. But I'm so glad that it resonated with all of you and that you're coming to the discussion today. And the reason I wanted to pull this discussion together, we've got a couple introductions here. So for the longest time, our industry has been extremely male dominated. It's just been the history of brass performance. And, over the past 20 to 30 years, there's really been a larger and larger influx of females into the brass performance and into the music industry. And for brass players, for us, it's really created a series of issues. As anybody entering a new world, there's alienation, there's shaming, there's for our gender, there's issues of over-sexualizing our gender on the job, which can make us very uncomfortable. And, what are our expectations of entering the brass performance industry for ourselves as performers or teachers, and how do we deal with it when we start running into some of those issues? And to take it to the next level, and as I'm describing it, it's from men that we get the shaming and the over sexualization from, and alienation, but that happens, females can create those same issues for each other. So, women can shame each other and alienate each other and be very competitive with each other too. So, where you're looking to, you've got two women in your section, you're looking to your other female as an ally, she might not be. So how do you deal with that? And then a lot of these things, in my experience, and I know from these women here that I've spoken with, a lot of these things happen subtly. So, you don't realize at first that it's a problem, but over time you realize, no, I'm getting shamed by doing this, or I'm feeling bad about this. And, so how do we define what we deal with and what we put up with and what we don't put up with? So a lot of questions. And then a couple of you sent me questions and also. So we are going to begin with the discussion with kind of focusing in on school, because I think going away to school for the first time where you're on your own, you're not in that cocoon of your beginner band or whatever. It's really the first time that we experience a lot of these issues. So I know in our planning discussion or planning session for this discussion, I remember, Beth and Kate and I were talking a little bit about this, like these experiences in school, and each of ours had a little bit different color. We each had different experiences of running to situations that raised our eyebrows or just were completely debilitating. But Kate and Beth, why don't you start this off? Where were your first moments in your school career that you kind of realized this isn't the same anymore, those first moments of discomfort?
Hi. Yeah, I think for me in my undergrad, I mostly dealt with comments that were, like you mentioned, just sort of subtle, like, you can't play as loud or things like that. But where I really, I guess, experienced something that I felt was definitely crossing the line was in my grad school, where I had a professor who will remain nameless comment on my shirt that I was wearing and asked me to do a little spin because he liked how it looked. And I remember raising my eyebrows and I just laughed it off because it came out of the blue. It surprised me. And then later that night, I was just really thinking about it and I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to wear in my lessons now, and it made me feel very uncomfortable. In the moment though, I think I didn't know how to respond, it caught me off guard and I wish that maybe I'd had these conversations, before then, so I knew how to respond to that. think I would respond very differently now, at this stage. But I think for me that was the biggest thing. Lots of little comments, but luckily that was as bad as anything got for me in college.
So when I was in high school, I was lucky enough to be in a small combo with some friends who happened to all be women as well. So I felt like growing up in high school, I always had this supportive community of women, both in jazz and just in music in general. So then when I moved to New York and I was 18 and young and hungry, that was sort of when I realized like that it was different, that I was a woman playing trumpet in, playing all these different styles of music, because people would be like, oh, you're the lead trumpet player, or like you're the soloist on this tune. Like, what is this? So then I definitely like, oh, people are treating me differently now. This is kind of weird. So I didn't necessarily feel it at school from colleagues until I was also in my master's, when I was in an all male studio, and I felt that, that bro hang culture, which sometimes can be really fun, but in some instances it was not fun. And I definitely felt, just like this negative pressure and being judged in different ways, and both from teachers and from other students. And that whole like, let's treat people differently thing is not fun. We should all be obviously treated the same way. So that's been my experience growing up in school.
Yeah. Have any of you, have any of you had the direct, I guess what I'm asking, wow, I just blanked out there completely. I think alienation is the first thing we run into. For me, it's the opposite. Like for me, it was always the first couple of weeks of being in a new situation. we were all the same. And I kind of felt like I'd be part of the pack. But in my experience, guys would always one up each other, and I would like, that's not something that I was about. And all of a sudden, it would be something that would remind me that, no, you're not one of the pack. And I guess, clothes, like how you dress that can, you're not dressing in a, alluring way. You're just wearing your normal clothes, or you might have dressed up nice for an event, but that suddenly it becomes a point of alienation. Or, after auditions started, you're all friends, but you got ahead of another guy, and now all of a sudden there's alienation there. What are some other forms of alienation you guys have felt or you remember from those first couple of years of school? And this is to the whole group.
I think doing gigs whenever there's a changing room, and there's no, like, I don't have any solution to this. Like, we definitely don't need one room for everyone. But whenever, like, the whole brass section would be in their changing room hanging and getting ready for the gig, and I'd be, like, in a room with a bunch of the string players and woodwinds who are all very nice, but I don't get to be a part of that brass hang. And that would always feel really annoying and sad. Because sometimes it would be then that people would make plans to go grab beers after. And then because I wasn't in the room originally for that conversation, I wouldn't be invited to the after hang. So just things like that, where we're like literally not in the same place to be able to be treated in the same way. It's kind of hard.
I had a professional experience a couple years ago. I was playing a gig at the Chicago Theater in the Loop in Chicago. And it was an entirely male brass section with the exception of one other woman and myself. And it was one of these gigs set up where there was a rehearsal, a dinner break, and then the concert was later that evening. So during the break, all the brass had planned to go out to eat. And when I texted, where are we going to meet to eat? They told me that they were going to the Tilted Kilt. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with that restaurant, but it's like Hooters except with skirts instead of tops. So I did not feel comfortable. I just couldn't go there with all of my male professional colleagues. I did not feel comfortable going there to eat. So everyone else went there and I went to Panera, which was super lame, but I felt extremely alienated in that situation.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of, did I mute myself? No, I didn't. That's kind of part of, where do you draw the line? What do you put up with and what do you not put up with, and do you feel empowered enough to get up and change your environment or do something about it, even though you might know you raised a couple eyebrows? And I feel that's a position where I feel like that falls on our shoulders a lot more than it does our male counterparts. And let me preface everything we're saying here. Men and women have their own issues in their field. So I'm not dismissing what men go through in the workforce. Also, I'm not a man, so I can't articulate what they go through, but so this is really what we're going through. And so I guess going back to my question, where do you draw the line, and how do you learn where that line is, I guess, because for each person it's different. So Callie, why don't you keep on going there for a second? Was there something that happened like early on that you realized, no, this is where I need to draw my line and this is how I need to draw it?
Well, I've never been to Hooters and I have no problem with the food or the service. Like, that's totally fine. I just don't choose to go there, and I wouldn't go to the Tilted Kilt either to eat because I think I have other options that I don't feel are degrading. So I knew that I wasn't going to go there when I heard that that's where they were going, and I was like, why? There are so many great restaurants in downtown Chicago. Why would you go to a chain restaurant? So that was my first problem. But anyway, I ended up at Panera. So what should I say? But I knew that I would feel uncomfortable understanding what the commercialism is of a restaurant like that, and why that might just be one reason. Maybe they have great food too, I don't know, but knowing that is like one reason people choose to go there was like, I'm not going to put myself in this position with professional colleagues. And I know that the other woman that was playing in this brass section did go with them, and like she had a great time, and I'm sure it was like totally fine, but I wasn't comfortable doing that. And it wasn't because I needed to like stand my ground or prove a point. I just wasn't comfortable, so I didn't go. And I wish I had something more courageous that, you know, I could spout about that situation. But that was where I was with it. And you know, it was, I learned something from it. And I think it was a valuable experience for me to have. And it's unfortunate that it happened. And, you know, that was a couple of years ago now. So hopefully things, you know, maybe we're making small steps toward progress. But yeah, I would just have to say, like really weigh it out for yourself. Like, where do you feel comfortable? And if something doesn't feel right to you, then like you definitely shouldn't do it. And yes, you might miss out, like Kate was saying, on some opportunities for like networking or just like hanging in some of the fun conversations and stuff. But is it worth what you have to give up to do it? And I think at that line for everyone is in a little bit different spot. And maybe in some situations it's gray, and in other situations it has really bold borders. But you have to know where that is for yourself and make those decisions, I think, as they come.
Yeah, I think I'll add to something similar to what Kate was saying. In high school, when I started playing jazz music, because that's the music that I play mostly, I was surrounded by other women, and so it wasn't much of a thought, and I wasn't aware of the music scene and jazz scene specifically being really, really male dominated until I got to college. So it was when I was, you know, in college, one of a few, like 2 women the whole time I was there for 4 years. That's when things become more unsettling and you feel more isolated. And I think realizing when I was in school, I didn't feel like I had another outlet, you know, because those were the people that I surrounded myself with. Those are the people that I was playing with. And it wasn't until I got out of school that I felt more empowered to say no to certain people, or say, like, I don't want to play with this person because I know something happened with them. And, you know, the community, although there's a lot of musicians in New York, like, word travels pretty fast. And I thankfully know a lot of women in the city now who kind of, we look out for each other and we tell each other what goes on. So I think at this point, I do feel more empowered to choose who I want to play with and choose the people that I surround myself with. So that's helped me past school, I think.
For me, going to when I went to my first school, the University of Tampa, it was really small. So we had a trumpet section of like 4 to 5 for the entire time that I was there. So it's a private university, and it had a department of music instead of like a school of music. So everything was just mini, you know, in general. And actually, most of the years that I was there, we were mostly women in the trumpet section. So I never felt the gap. And that had a lot of impact for me as I went to my master's degree, because going to the University of Tampa, I grew up in Tampa. So I went to middle school there and high school, and everybody kind of, you know, we all kind of knew each other. And even if we were going to different universities, everyone kind of knew like the main trumpet people in town, and, you know, things like that. And I had always had so much support in high school, as a musician and as a leader, being like drum major. I never felt like I got held back by being a woman. I was always first chair. Um, I always try to be a good, you know, a good influence on my peers and things like that. So I left the University of Tampa to go to my master's degree, and it was just like world different. Actually, the world is different out there. So I arrived at the school where I obviously didn't really know anyone. I didn't know the town. It was the University of South Carolina. And it was, I think it was a studio of like 22 or 23. And they were all guys, and then me. So we had like the first studio picture, you know, and it's like 21 white guys, 1 black guy, and myself. So I sent the picture to my mom, and she's like, wow, okay, you know, be careful. No, it was that sort of reaction. I I think for me, it's just I had so much support growing up. I kind of grew up thinking I'm cool, like I don't care, and I think that I always tried to put off that vibe. Um, and I think that's helped me. I grew up with my mom telling me never lower your gaze, stand up for what you believe. Someone is staring at you and it makes you feel uncomfortable, stare right back. And I have actually done that many times. It works every time. So, piece of advice for you ladies out there: someone's looking at you and it makes you uncomfortable, just stare right at them. It makes it really uncomfortable for them. It works. It has worked every time, like I said. So, but when I got there, there was definitely a different vibe. The things that made me feel the most uncomfortable in that male dominated environment at that point were the comments that I consistently had to listen to going on around me. So, very inappropriate things about girls, sexualization of women, mistreating women in many different ways. And at first, it was hard because I didn't say anything, because I didn't know what to say. And I think that that's the problem. It's not like we have a handbook, like when you hear this, say that. We don't have a teleprompter. So it's hard to know what to say in these situations when also these people are your actual real life colleagues that you're probably going to gig with next week. You always run the risk of pushing them away and then not getting the gig, not advancing your career. But I guess from what Kelly said, you have to know where your line is and where you're going to draw it. There's definitely different levels of comfort zones for things like that based on our personal experiences. And at one point, I learned to just say, hey, have a little respect. And that was one thing that I said a lot. When I heard something some of them were saying sometimes, and I would just turn over and be like, hey, have a little respect. And it would just level them out right there. And from that point on, they all kind of learned. They kind of got the vibe that I wasn't just gonna sit around and say nothing. And that got easier as I got older, but it's hard when you're young for sure.
Yeah, I think I saw in the attendees a large demographic was women in their 20s. And if you're in school right now or just getting out of school, I think one of the things I'm thinking about hearing all of our panelists' stories is school is a great time to learn how to be consistent in who you're going to be. Because I think, like, if Kelly didn't know where her line was a couple years ago and she was a different person on each gig, that would probably raise some eyebrows. But I live in Chicago too. Kelly and I actually were in a quintet for many years together. I know who Kelly is. I know who she's always going to be. And she's one of the most hired horn players in Chicago. Sorry, she's not in Chicago anymore. She moved to Florida. I forgot. It's very recent.
Mary, we were in grad school together too.
Grad school. It's true. So Kelly and I've had a long history, but I know who Kelly is, and she gets hired a lot because people know who she is, and they know her expectations for performance, for herself, for how she's going to be treated. And I think maybe that's one of our strongest assets as women or as performers in the music world, is to establish who we're going to be and stay consistent. We're going to be hard workers, going to be experts at our craft, and we're going to respect ourselves and the people around us. And how do we define that? I mean, school is a great time to figure those things out so you can be as consistent as you can be through the rest of your career, because those are the things that people remember, whether you're a guy or you're a girl. So
yeah, I think it's really about setting a standard, like whatever your standard is, and as it changes, like, okay, well, here's my standard now, because like no matter what, people are already gonna try you because of like we're women in the industry. But no, it's just like, unfortunately, I always say, like, it shouldn't be our job to teach people how to treat other people with respect and dignity, but unfortunately, the sad reality is that some people, if they continue to get away with treating people a certain way or acting a certain way, like they'll just keep doing it. So for me, one of the eye openers was, it's like, okay, if I just ignore it and don't say anything, then that's almost like a go for this person to keep on like doing it and maybe even do it to somebody else. So, and I just eventually was like sick of certain things and just wanted to stand up for myself and like protect my own peace. So now it's like sometimes I can be very direct with people, but it's all a matter of like like not disrespecting and like not making other people uncomfortable. It's like those two things are like I really can't stand with people. So it's just really making it known from the get-go. So either you just don't work with that person again or they learn and adapt, and you know, either way, you just got to be okay with either the outcomes.
Yeah. And I mean, this, we're kind of pushing now into the career stage. You know, you're done with school and you start establishing yourself and building a career for yourself, which I think is what most of us in the attendees section and the panelists, I mean, that we were all concerned about, you know, like how do we build a career for ourselves? And, you know, it was actually discussions like this, which in some ways built up a lot of fear for me in terms of what I was going to get there in the career world. So I want to talk a little bit about our expectations of what we thought we were walking into. Were they confirmed? Were they not confirmed? And kind of who? Well, I'll save that question for later. Kate, why don't we start with you on this one, because you had a fun splash into your first gig on Broadway. And actually, that was one of the questions from our attendees. What was your first big gig? That kind of, you know, how did you get it and how did that all play out? But what was your expectation for your first, you know, your first introduction to Broadway? And you can take it from there.
Sure. So since I moved to New York, I always knew that subbing on Broadway and eventually having my own chair would be like the dream. And it still is the dream because, of course, Broadway now is shut down and we're still waiting to go back to work. But I had always played like regional theater productions. And if anyone was like, oh, do you want to play this musical at this random high school in this terrible area? I'm like, yes, sign me up. I was just so excited. And there's just like this power of being the lead trumpet player, like soaring over the whole orchestra, and like I just love it. And I loved being a part of a pit and like feeling like we're supporting everything, and just something about that camaraderie with the cast and the pit. It was just like, love it. And so I knew that I wanted to sub. And so, you know, I would get coffee with people and grab drinks and, you know, ask advice and take lessons. And then eventually I was given the first opportunity to sub on a show. And I've been subbing there, so I guess for like 3 years or so. And I thought that when, you know, I feel like my experience now has changed with it, because as you get better, you realize like where the standard is. And so like I know I did well the first couple times, but as I got better, my own standards changed. For like doing well used to be here, but now doing well is here. And so every time I would try and one up myself. But because I knew a lot of the people in the pit, I was like, oh, this is going to be this really great supportive environment. And that wasn't necessarily the case as a woman, because I was the only woman in the brass section. And I definitely encountered a couple really unfortunate sexist experiences. Some were like mild, from things like people calling me sweetie, stuff like that. Sometimes people would do like the leg tap or the leg rub like after a solo. And I definitely encountered and like dealt with these experiences in different ways. Like some of those things I'm like, hey, like, can you not do that? But a lot of times, honestly, these were coming from older people who I really respect and admire in the scene. And I didn't say anything because at that time, it was several years ago, I was really young and didn't really know how to do anything about it. But then something else happened that I was a lot more upset and bothered by. And I eventually talked to some of the administration about it and got it changed and fixed. So when every time I would walk in the pit, I wouldn't be encountering, you know, pictures of women in compromising positions in the workplace. So that has now been removed from the premises, and I definitely have always felt more comfortable, you know, going there. And after I sort of proved myself in a way, I think people, you know, of all genders respected me, and I felt like welcome there, you know, with my playing and my personality and just me as a person. So I think that's sort of my experience there. But every other show opportunity I've had, like playing my own chair on off-Broadway shows, I hadn't felt any sexism or mistreatment at all. So it's really different based on the gig. So I'm really lucky that all of those other experiences, no one would look at me in any way and say like, oh, you're a woman trumpet player. I was like, no, it was just another person in the band. So in that sense, it's been really great.
And now, Leslie, I'm not as familiar with your career, but I'm pretty sure your big splash into the scene was the Beyonce tour, right? Or did something happen before then?
Well, my first, because most of the opportunities I feel like were very like big and life-changing for me, all came from like other women who I was either working with or like kind of saw as a mentor. So like maybe one of my very like first really big gigs was the BET Black Girls Rock. That was the first time I've ever played on like national television. And a person who I can't remember, I can't remember if it was this past year or the previous year at NAMM, this woman, Katy Rodriguez, who I had been, we met through a random like church gig. And then from like me doing that church gig and like, I guess doing it well enough, she's like, oh, what about this? Because she's one of the original members of Beyonce's original all-female band. So she was really instrumental, I think, in taking me to like the next level of like doing those types of gigs where a little bit more is like on the line as far as like not messing up with TV. But that was a situation where it was like an all-female band and really dope female MD. So like that, and again with the Beyonce gig, is I'm stepping in to like a room of like amazing, dope women. So yeah, and so those experiences have been great. I don't really have anything negative to say about those.
It doesn't need to be negative. I mean, it's awesome if the first splash into the scene is this amazing experience. We're focusing a lot on the negative, but like, but there's a lot of positive things too. Yeah.
Because those moments were kind of like the first time being in both of those bands. Unfortunately, the first time where I've been in a room full of like amazing women who are like killing in their own right, but then two, also like because it's a room full of women, I don't have to experience like all the mess that I do on a normal basis, like just in the jazz scene or just in the music scene in general. So I think about it I think about it a lot, like it's pretty interesting.
So do any of you, I mean, I think what Leslie is describing, I think we've all hopefully had some experiences where we got to perform or work with a lot of strong women in the field that have already paved the way before us. And I'll open this up to all the panelists. Is there anybody specific who kind of paved the way for you, like that you kind of could lean on or see, look to as a good example of who you wanted to be in the music industry?
I mean, I'm here because of Mary, everybody. So that's right there. I'm here with you guys and have done a bunch of cool stuff with Denis Wick because Mary. She found me and she pulled me in. We had some Mexican food at at some conference. I can't remember right now, and that was the beginning of a lot of things. So it's about women pulling women through, and yeah.
Beth, you raised your hand too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I play in the brass band scene mostly these days, and for me, I've been really lucky in most of my experiences there. I play the principal cornet with the Chicago Brass Band, which is a competition band, and luckily for me, when I came in, there had already been several females who had been the principal cornet in that band before, so that a culture had already really been established there for me to easily just step into. I just came in and played. And again, Mary was one of those. So props to Mary one more time. So for in that band, that was very much the case. I've not if anybody thinks ill of me because I'm a woman, they hide it really well. I've never once, had a problem there. I also play principal cornet with the Chicago Staff Band, which is a Salvation Army band, and for me, there's something very similar. So the person who now sits next to me and sits, I'm assistant principal. Her name is Peggy Thomas, and she was actually the first woman in a Salvation Army staff band allowed, and she held that seat for like 35 years. And so she's a huge mentor for me, both playing and just as a person, and just hearing all of her experiences. I mean, we're talking about, maybe some negative experiences that we've had with men. And I mean, I feel like I don't even have a right to speak to it when I hear about things, from her generation that she had to put up with, being locked in a bathroom on the bus, for an entire, 4-hour trip and things like that. And I'm like, oh, so here I am complaining about somebody telling me I can't play loud. So I feel a little silly, about my complaints in comparison. But for me, I would just say that I've been really lucky for the groups that I've played in. I also play with the brass band of Battle Creek, which is a blast, and talk about some fine musicians in that group. And again, uh, can't really give any complaints in terms of you know being a female in the section. I think right now I'm the only female in the cornet section in that group, so that's a little different for me in that one, but there it just feels kind of like family. So I've been pretty lucky.
That's something that came up in our planning session. I think Kate brought that up, that, our students right now that we're teaching, so that are probably still in high school, they have such a different definition of the workforce and equality, and than the women who paved the way for us. And so, Kalia, you're the youngest artist on the call or on the discussion right now. Um, what do you what did you envision as you left school and going into the workforce? Did you have fear because you were a woman, or did you just have fear because you're a musician entering a difficult job?
I think the fear for me was mostly while I was in school. I was actually really excited to get out of school and be my own person, and be my own band leader, because I had already formed a band of my own when I was in college and playing with musicians outside of my school. And so I was really excited to kind of, as Leslie, I like what Leslie said earlier about setting standards and being okay with changing your standards as you go through your career and as you grow up and learn different things. And I think that is really true to my career and what I've learned. I realized getting out of school that, oh, I can set my own standards. I can play with who I want to play with in terms of my band. Obviously I'm still in situations where I'm a side woman where something happens, or I don't like working with a certain guy, but then after that I can still make a decision not to work with them, or I can still set another standard after that experience. And I'm grateful that I've been able to be successful in the career that I've chosen for myself while setting standards. And I think it was a lot harder to do that when I was in school, because you're told what to do, you're told what to learn, what to work on. You hang out with the people that you're around, which were all men for me. And so I felt like I couldn't really pave the way for myself when I was in that environment. And so the fear kind of, obviously there's other fears in being a freelance musician, especially in New York City, and being a woman, but I felt a lot more empowered when I was out of that school environment. And I was kind of ready to kind of hit the ground running when I was out of school.
Anybody else? Oh, Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on that. Speaking of finding your own people, I also felt like throughout school I didn't necessarily have a good group of supportive colleagues of all genders. And so in both of my degrees, I was always trying to find people. And of course, I've been in New York, so I've been really lucky that there's so many amazing people. Some women and some other people who I can choose to play with. And so, but this goes for all young people as well. There's always going to be someone, in your town or at another university or even online now, who you can buddy up with and try and connect with and just like make something together, whether it's just a duet or a practice partner or like starting a real group, because it's just so important to find these people. because, obviously Kalia is talking about it. I know about it as well. But it's just, you feel so much happier and more inspired musically when you can be with people that make you comfortable and that push you in all the right ways. So highly recommend that.
And I'll add one last comment onto that one too. Being you, you're not, for everybody that's out there listening to this because you're looking for, uh, path, right? To whatever it may be, like finding the right thing to say when you're in an uncomfortable situation, or because you feel alone in your field. That's definitely a feeling some of us might have encountered at some point. And my main thing is just be yourself. You're not an idea of a person. You're an actual person. You don't fit in any mold. Like, just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you're like this, or just because you're a man doesn't mean like you're this. This personally might resonate with someone out there, but I'm a woman and I'm gay. So that, in a man's world, where there's just guys and they're always talking about girls and all these things, I encounter this so many times, like, oh, Estella's cool with it because she's one of the guys. No. No. You don't fit into a mold. Just because I'm one way doesn't mean that I'm okay with having these discussions sexualizing women or whatever. So you be you, set whatever your line is, set it straight and be honest to yourself. And that's going back to what Kay was saying. That's when you're going to be the happiest, and that's when you're going to attract people that are going to be in your in your environment, in your area, and to share your set of morals. So yeah, that's the big key, I think.
One of the questions that came from multiple of our attendees was, how do you get through the rough spots? I mean, we know that. I mean, I think I feel very empowered from all of your answers that, we really need to just hone in on who we are and how, what we do. But there are some definable rough spots. I know, I mean, for me, I went away to the private school for music for high school, and it was a male dominated brass section. I don't know that any of the female brass players that I went to school with continued on to play music, because it was pretty oppressive. And like by the end, I'd play solos, and a guy would be given the stand-up call to get the applause for the solo. And it was just like hit after hit after hit. And how do you pick yourself up from that? I mean, for me, I called my mom, I think, every single day, every single night for about a year during the worst of it. I got bullied for about a year by a guy who I beat out of first chair. And he stressed me out so much. He was bullying me through every single rehearsal. I ended up getting chat problems, and I couldn't play for the second half of the year. How do you resign those things that happen to you? And for attendees, maybe it's not that bad, but there's things that just stick to you, like that affect how you're going to enter the workforce. And as we all know, now that we're in the workforce, there's no room for carrying on the ugliness of something that we've been through. So, does that resonate with any of you guys? And do you have some advice as to how to push through the rougher spots that you've been through?
I'll just say something quick, but just talk to someone, to really find someone who supports you, whether it be a family member, a friend, a partner of yours, someone at school that you feel, comfortable telling those things to. But you just have to talk about it, because I, for a long time, did not talk about stuff, and it caused like chronic pain in my body. Like I had tension headaches every day, and I had like chronic stomach pain for my whole last year of school. And I tried everything. And I remember it was 2 months after I graduated, and it was a daily stomach pain, and it entirely went away after 2 months of graduating, after I had talked to someone about what happened. And that's when, that's when I met a lot of different women when I was out of school. And, when I started working with more women and having it be a part of the conversation just kind of helped me process things and realize that it happens to a lot of women in the field, and realizing you're not the only one who's going through it, which, you know, at the time I knew I wasn't the only one, but you just don't want to talk about it. You don't want to address it, or at least I didn't want to, but it like can really cause you a lot of pain or make you not want to play music anymore. And so, you know, just find someone you can talk to.
My advice would be like separate yourself or your own personal ego from your performance ego or from your instrument ego. You are not defined by your last performance, or you are not defined by fill in whatever the blank is there. And that is a really difficult, but it is an achievable goal, is to these two things are parallel, but they don't have to intersect. So don't, you know, it's really easy to combine those two elements, but to find outlets outside of music, other things that you're interested in, like maybe you're really into CrossFit or running 5Ks or whatever the thing is you like to do to help you kind of get some of that out. I also agree with Kalia about finding someone to talk to, maybe like a friend group or something, but just having hobbies that are completely exclusionary of music, I think, is also helpful. That you can just completely get away from it for a little while and just kind of reboot your brain. But I think it's really, really important for our mental health to be able to take the music or the performance parts of ourselves and put it away, even if it's overnight or for a day or for a weekend, so that you can just make sure that you're like being true to yourself all the time, giving yourself the space that you need to heal if you've had a difficult or painful performance situation, and being able to have outlets to express what you need to get out, and to be able to find a way to do that that's not through your instrument.
Was there anybody else that had advice? I didn't listen.
Oh, go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, I love what both of you are saying. And I also want to say thank you to Kalia for being one of my people to talk to. I remember I called you crying after a gig, I think a year or two ago, and it was like super late at night, and you were so sweet and you answered, and it was really rough for me. And yeah, so we are all already supporting each other in some ways. The only other thing I would add is for everyone who, you know, has already had a difficult experience or may, is to just remember your why, like why you play music or what you're hoping to achieve with your career, and just really, really think about that and know that you're doing everything you can to get better at that and to work towards that every day. And I think that makes some of the kind of annoying, insensitive comments or experiences feel a lot less, you know, hurtful, because you're like, oh, I'm just like on this path to be the next principal trumpet. So it doesn't matter what this person is telling me. Like, I know that I'm doing all the things that I can do. I'm taking lessons, I'm practicing. So if you're doing all those things already, you know, then it doesn't matter what somebody else is saying. So.
To
And
add on, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lexi.
I was gonna just to piggyback off of what Kate just said. For me, it was like realizing that whatever it is, whatever your goal is, or whatever your musicality is that you want to accomplish, that whatever you have has value and deserves to be in the world. Like something Caddy told me on like one of our first gigs together that's always resonated with me is that, you know what, I may not be this, I may not be that, but I know at the end of the day, nobody can give you Caddy Rodriguez like I can give you Caddy Rodriguez. Like nobody can give what you have to offer other than you. And I think there's a strength in owning that and knowing that. So no matter like what other people try to convince you, like, oh, like you're female trumpet player, you can't do this, or you don't belong here. It's like having that, so it's not really confidence, but just like knowledge of your own self-worth will like get you through. It's like, okay, whatever, but I know like this is what like people gonna hear me. And I think it ties into what Kate was just saying.
I'll throw in one last one to overcome. It's be sensible to the people around you and fine tune your interpersonal relationships. It's really important to not just find your fellow female allies, but male is especially important. So for me, when I was much younger, there was this older guy who always hugged me way too long. And it was, at the time, I had no idea what it meant. It didn't really click. I wasn't that young either. Well, I was probably like 19. But he was this guy that had a lot of connections. And my teacher at the time, my trumpet teacher at the time, was my guy. He was the guy that like would see it and be like, yeah. He would like purposely like push him away a little. And so I felt very safe around him. In college, I remember taking this trip to Italy, and there was one of my classmates who stood behind me when we walked on the street at night, because we were kind of in this shady area and there were a lot of drunk guys around and all these things. And he walked behind me to protect me. I didn't ask him to do that, but I was the only girl. These guys, I remember these guys came up behind us and they said something in Italian. And I understand some Italian, so I could tell what it was. And he was like, he looked at them like, that face, like, back off. And so again, I felt very safe around him. At an ITG conference, I relied on Ken Saul from Ultra Pure Oils, who's a very good friend of mine, to walk me 10 minutes to my hotel at night in San Antonio, Texas, because it's a rough area down there. So find the women. Yes, we all need the support, absolutely. But find the guys too, because there's good ones out there, a lot of good ones. And when they're on your side, man, it makes a whole world difference for how safe you can feel.
A couple discussions have popped up about mentorship, which we are definitely going to get to. I kind of wanted to bring in one last thing here too about expectations of the industry, because we should have an expectation that there are a lot of great guys to work with out there too, and that working in an all male section isn't always going to be uncomfortable. And that, if you are uncomfortable, it doesn't necessarily mean that the men in the section are horrible people. It might just be that you are one of the first men they've had to play with. And so in the planning discussion, I keep on picking on Kate, but I remember this was like one of the points I wanted to hit. But she was describing how her first, couple times playing on Broadway, she made sure to wear, clothes that were, just as close to the guy as close as possible. So she didn't stand out. She didn't cause any distraction as they got used to her, as they got to know her. And if I'm not describing this correctly, please correct me, Kate.
No, you're great. This is perfect.
But she kind of slowly and gracefully put herself into their community. And so I think that's such an important, I think our expectations of what we're walking into need to be accurate also. So do any of you really quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, but I want to definitely get some mentorship, but do any of you have some, what's your frame of mind when you enter a new job scene where you don't know all the people? You might be the lone female on the crew. How do you dress? How do you talk? How do you insert yourself in that new community? And someone run with that question.
I think I just try to be myself, and I show up to the gig prepared. I kind of try to leave no room for somebody to call me out on anything other than how well prepared I was for the gig. Especially a lot of times in jazz gigs and being a side woman, I know walking into a room of a big band that it's probably going to be mostly men. And so that's not really in the forefront of my mind when I go into a room. It's just I practice my parts. I'm going to go in and just be confident, be myself, be strong. And if I don't feel comfortable by what someone says or the way that somebody looks at me, I stick to what I'm doing and what I'm there to do, and I leave afterwards, And so for me, it's just I'm just going to be professional and be how I would be with any group of people that I walk in a room with. And sometimes it's harder than others, but that's kind of my mindset going into any gig, regardless of who's in the room.
Anybody
I think for me, I think that totally makes sense. I think you just need to own it and be yourself and, be prepared, exactly like she's saying. I think in terms of clothing for me, if am a soloist or something at a gig, you have a little bit more leeway than if you're playing in a section. But if I have to look twice at an outfit and I'm like, should I wear that? For me, I just always, err on the side of caution at this point. Just if I even have to think about it, then somebody out there is going to think that maybe it was not something I should wear, right? So for me, I just err on the side of caution.
I feel like I'm lucky enough to be in a position now to that if something is very apparent not for me, whether it's like something like there's a certain expectation on like me dressing a certain way or whatever, then I'll just probably like not come back to that situation. Because also I'm used to like being on different gigs where sometimes people pick like the vibe of like what the dress you're going for. That's just a part of like the particular, I guess, sectors of the industry that I work in. And now I'm very comfortable on like wearing different things. That has been like for as far as like what I talked about, like my standards changing, like that's definitely been something. The more I've been like grown and been more confident in like in my body and like my self-image, it's like now I feel like I can wear like a wide range of things. So unless like the person, whoever's gig it is, I'm thinking like if I'm a side woman or in the band of somebody else's performance, if they set a standard and whatever I come into that, then that's like one thing. But if it's something that doesn't sit well with me, all I can do is just be like, yeah, that doesn't really sit well with me or whatever, or like what, not, it doesn't have to be like clothing related. Like if any aspect of the gig or like the requirements don't fit in what I feel is crucial to me as a person and as a human being, then all I can do is just voice my concerns or call people out sometimes, because it's very real. Me and Kali have been on gigs together where I feel like we've had to call people out on like some BS. And you might not get hired again. That's cool. And you just gotta be okay, because why would you want to go back into a situation where you're constantly not, like your concerns or your crucial concerns, I guess, are not being acknowledged.
Yeah. Muted. Yep. Thanks, guys. So we have got a couple minutes left. Let's get into mentorship. There's one of our attendees asked, how do you find a mentor if you don't have any women in your area that you can really reach out to? And I know Kate runs a group, a Facebook group. There's lots of ways to do it. I mean, just from my standpoint, I would like to do this like maybe once a month or maybe once a quarter, that we just, we'll just reach out to everybody who came to this program, and you can invite your friends, but let's get a growing list of women in brass so we can just get together. Maybe we'll pick a new topic for each meeting, but that's, stuff like this, you can, get to know our names. If you want to reach out to any of these artists, you can find them on the Denis Wick app. But how did you all reach out? How did you find mentors, or did the mentors find you?
I'll just start because I have a very quick answer. My first teacher in New York, Lori Frank, was an amazing mentor to me and to so many other people. And so I didn't really realize how much I needed a female trumpet teacher until I got here and I was with her. And I also didn't really realize how much I needed it until 10 years later, when I realized that was the last person that I had that was a female teacher. And I was like, oh my God, I miss her so much. Like, I want someone who just understands all of this stuff the way we do. And so that was an amazing thing to me, but it doesn't always have to be a teacher. I messaged this person. And so if anyone doesn't see the answer, finding online resources and just people to talk to online can be really, really amazing. Whether it's lessons or even just reaching out to, your heroes over email. I think like asking about, like, how did you handle this situation? Or do you have any advice for young people growing up, as a trumpet player, like as a musician in jazz or whatever it is, because over email, even people could be super, super helpful. So.
And let me also encourage other ladies to give their advice too. But you guys have my email address. You got you can contact me through the email that you got with the link. But you can always reach out if you have any additional questions or you want to get to know any of us a little better. You can always send me an email, talk to me or any of, I can forward the email on to any of our panelists. Because I'm pretty sure any of us here would love to answer any of your questions if anything we've said has resonated with you. But anybody else have any? Kelly?
Yeah. When I moved to Chicago, I've had this plan all thought out that I had this list of people I was going to go play for. But the way that I found my first horn player mentor was not, she wasn't someone that I had been taking lessons with or that I ever took a lesson with, actually. But it was a woman who, she was about 10 years older than me, and she was like exactly where I wanted to be in 10 years from where I was. And so I just asked her if I could get her a coffee before a gig, and we met and we started talking and formed this like really beautiful sisterhood friendship. And, she helped me get like my first college teaching job and really helped me understand some situations that I was kind of naive to in the beginning. And moved from there actually to another woman named Janet, who's actually not even a brass player, but she had a position that I really admired and I had seen her handle so many situations so gracefully. And I just thought she has a lot to offer me if she's willing to kind of take me on. So, every once in a while she would send me some emails and recommend me a book, and I'd write her just some questions. And so these relationships with mentors can be really casual, but I think they can be really beneficial for both sides. And I think some of that finding your mentor happens organically, but other times, like in my situation, you may just have to seek them out a little bit. But it's been a really great resource for me to have, and I still have or mentor to this day.
Is there anybody else?
For me, it was a little bit of both. Like a couple of people I stumbled onto just from being on the scene, and others like when I was studying with Tanya Darby and Ingrid Jensen. It was because I wanted to study with them, and like the moment opportunity arose, like I took it. So yeah, like a nice little mixture of both. But yeah.
I don't think I had a female instructor when I was in 8th grade or 7th grade, and it was great. We really worked together well, and I felt so comfortable with her, but I wasn't old enough to realize that I was just really comfortable with having a female teacher. But I haven't had a female teacher yet. I have been a lone female in my music performance career for the most part, and definitely in my professional career. You think the brass industry is bad, the music industry is. There are really not a whole lot of females there. And I am jealous of all the wonderful female mentors that you guys are talking about. And I wish I had maybe reached out a little bit more, because as confident as I tried to make myself in all those situations, I think I spent all my energy trying to be confident and keep up with the environment that I was in. And I should have shifted my energy to, I think, finding some women to mentor me and to, give me advice along the way, because I think I felt a lot more strife, or I've held on to a lot of strife along the way because I didn't have those mentors to bounce ideas off or bounce experiences off of. I've just decided, well, I guess I'm surrounded by guys. That's just my lot in life. So I think my for the first time I really thought about it this way, but maybe it's a balance of energy. Are you going to waste all of your energy trying to keep up with the environment that's making you uncomfortable? Or are you going to push some of that energy to reaching out like Kelly did to connect with other women who are either in music or not, but women that inspire you? Yeah, Beth.
I think I would just say too that a mentor doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's older than you. I think a lot of times people, associate age with mentorship, but a lot of times just having colleagues, in your same age range even, or maybe just in ensembles or groups that you're a part of. It doesn't have to be necessarily like a teacher, but it's somebody who can help you work through an issue, or just even be there as a sounding board or somebody, to talk through things, that may come up, whether that is, problems or goals or, just somebody you can connect with. And so I think sometimes we always think, oh, it has to be somebody that's older than me, and it doesn't have to be.
Excellent. Well, we're coming up. Well, we just hit the hour mark, and I was going to leave some extra time open for questions. So attendees, if you got questions, feel free to start filtering those through. One of the attendee questions was, do you feel like your trajectory in your music career has been different, would have been different if you were a man? Like, how do you feel about your trajectory in the music? Why don't I just read her question? How has being a woman in music affected your trajectory in the industry? And would it have been any different if you were a man?
I'll jump in with this one. So, I see a lot of you guys are mainly performance, perform a lot. I teach a lot, so I spend full time just teaching Monday through Saturday, in person or online or whatever. And one thing that I've actually come across is sort of an advantage of being a woman trumpet teacher, because funnily enough, there's a lot of men who just have, there's the idea that like women are good teachers because like most teachers in school are women, right? And so I've gotten so many emails like, oh, I picked you, I picked your business because you're a woman and I think that you're gonna be a better teacher. So has it helped? You know, has it actually helped me? I don't know. I don't think that it would be like there's enough of a difference for it to actually have helped me tremendously. Um, but I do feel like it has helped me stand out because in what I do, especially like with online courses and memberships, I'm pretty sure I'm the only woman that does that at this scale right now. And and I do think if I was a man, I would have blended in a little more. So I'm gonna take what I can get right there.
I don't know if it's so much like would it be being different, because I definitely think it's somewhat of like people wanting to hire because you're a woman for whatever reason it might be. So I don't know if it's more of like that's more of an advantage or if that's what it should have always been like. Because as looking at all of us on here, it's like there are women who want to be brass players out here, but for whatever reason, maybe we're discouraged or just didn't have the support or means to be able to do it. So now that they're seeing like all these women, I know for me, it was just like, it was great. So like, yeah, why wouldn't I want to study with a woman, or why wouldn't I want to work like with more women? And then for like, there's a couple of guys who are like, oh man, it's so dope that not only that you're a woman, but you're also like a really like dope musician and can like do everything. So it's like, and I guess maybe it's just the not being used to that image and like not being around that much that it excites people. But I feel like that's just, if we lived in a perfect world, I think that's how it probably would be. Like it wouldn't be such a occurrence or like, oh my God thing if, we had all the opportunities to like be out here doing our thing. So
Do you guys feel like I mean, I still hear all the time, oh wow, you're a girl and you play trumpet. But do you feel like the anomaly of that is wearing off a little bit? Do you feel like over the years that's been easing up? Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that. I think I noticed it a lot with gender and age when I first came to the city, because I would look around. I'm like, yeah, I'm the only woman in the brass section, and I'm also the only person in my 20s. And then now, like, I'm still in my 20s, but like, I don't even notice this stuff anymore. Like, I had a rehearsal today, and everyone in the group is at least like 10 or more years older than me, and I don't think about it at all because I'm playing just as well as they am. They are. I'm not like, oh, I'm just not as good because I'm younger. Like I just don't notice it anymore. I don't notice age. I don't notice the gender. At least when I'm out in the world freelancing, I think with everything online now, it's a lot easier to notice this because we're just like literally looking at people's faces and videos. But in normal life, running around the city, it doesn't affect me as much, which is great because I can just play music and focus on that, which is why we're here. So, yeah.
Mary, I'm wondering if we can bounce back to the question that you asked before about like being a woman, and if you were a man, do you feel like your trajectory would have been different? And I have maybe a different experience. I don't know how many of the women on here are also mothers, but when I had my twins, I definitely felt some negative bias toward, what things that I did not experience before as just like a female horn player, that things were noticeably different after I had a baby. I happen to have 2 babies at home, but I don't think it matters how many you have. That people started making decisions for me. Oh, Kelly, she's got kids at home. She wouldn't want to drive here for this gig. Or, oh, Kelly's not going to be able to take a weekend to go play this gig out of town. And like, I just noticed that people were starting to, these things would get back to me. I heard that I had been like taken off of one group's sub list because I never told this woman like that I was available anymore. And it was just because she always called me at the last minute and I couldn't, like, I was already booked. But anyway, so I want to offer a different perspective for that, maybe being in a slightly different place in my career, is that I did feel like I had to fight that for a couple of years and just outright say to people, like, let me make the decision on whether I feel it's worth it to go to this gig or not. Like, and if I don't feel like it, then I'll turn it down, but like, give me the opportunity to play. And I feel like that has passed, and now my daughters are a little bit older, but it was definitely like something that I noticed. And even while I was pregnant, that I noticed people were starting to just treat me a little bit differently. I was in a pit. This was 8 weeks before I was due. I was playing in a pit, and it was up like, I only had like 2 more weeks left, I think, on the contract. And the contractor made me call in, like, have a sub come shadow me and learn my part, and I had to pay for that person to come out of my paycheck because he was worried that I might like go into labor, even though it was like 6 whole weeks before I was due. It was like more than 6 weeks before I was due. I remember just thinking, like, this is total crap. This is not fair at all. And he's totally like treating me differently because I'm pregnant. So yes, I feel like there was like a big pothole in my career, like around my pregnancy and then my little babies. But once my twins were like a little bit older, I don't feel that so much anymore. But I just wanted to share that I did feel like that happened.
Yeah, Kelly, I'm with you there. I have an 18-month-old daughter, and very much dealing kind of with what you're talking about right now. I mean, COVID happened, right? So that put a whole other wrench in everything. But I noticed, the feelings towards me were very different during pregnancy, especially. Not so much early on, but the larger I grew, the more noticeable it became. And I had several guest solo engagements the year that I was pregnant. And I remember getting some comments from colleagues actually saying something, oh, well, you played pretty well despite, your situation. I'm like, excuse me. Thank you. I thought I did pretty well, but yeah, it's amazing. People will see you differently for some strange reason when you're pregnant and having babies. But it's like, yeah, just let me decide if I can make that or not. So I will echo that.
I was really lucky when I was pregnant. I was touring with Kelly and our brass quintet. I was touring up until I was 6 months or 7 months pregnant. I don't know, 6 months maybe. And I was playing in an orchestra. I had to play Pines of Rome, I was playing principal in the last month of my pregnancy. And the most I got was we were trying to figure out how I could squeeze between the stands to get backstage, which took a little guesswork because I was pretty big at that point. But the biggest thing actually for me where I got a little alienated was when I was getting married. One of the groups I was playing, and the leader of that group had been talking behind my back saying, oh, well, she's getting married now, she's going to want to focus on family, so she probably doesn't want to play with us anymore. And it's just the weirdest things, these assumptions pop up. And it's not, I wanted to say it, like, we all do it, like we all assume something. And so I think we have to have grace for the people. We have to give people a chance, and we have to have the expectation that people are going to give us a chance too, because it's easy. I mean, and actually the Alliance Brass, before Kelly became part of the group, we were one of the groups looking at Kelly thinking, man, it would be great if she had time. But she was part of another touring brass quintet at the time and other things. And we made the assumption that she probably wouldn't have time to join our group, because she would have had to like memorize a whole program and audition it for a touring company within the space of 2 weeks or something, in addition to committing to a 2-month-long touring. It's crazy.
And I did it.
She did it with $4. She's like, I think maybe it was between the two of us, but she called me out. She's like, can I make that decision, Mary? Because I think I can make time for it. And I know, like, I brought that to the group, and we're like, well, okay. I think it made all of us a little nervous, but like, it took Kelly to say, no, I need to be making that decision. And she didn't make a stink about it or anything, but she was firm and said, I need to make that decision. I can do it. I can commit to this. And because, and I feel like the overwhelming, sorry, there's a cat in my room that I didn't realize was here. I think the overwhelming thing that I feel like we keep on coming back to is you got to stay true to yourself. And my answer to the question, would my trajectory be different as a man? There might be a lot of things that are different in terms of the colors of it and the emotions of it, because men versus women, but I think really, if you're going to be a musician and you're going to be successful, you have to establish who you are, and you have to be consistent, and you have to stand up for yourself, and you have to just, have respect for yourself and the people around you. Would you ladies agree? Big nods. All right. Are there any questions from the attendees? And if not, that's all right. I think we've covered all the questions we have time for. Oh. And we've got a compliment from one of our attendees said, well, you guys can all see it, but thank you for sending us the appreciation. We had 2 attendees send us. Oh,
sorry, that's actually my real life biggest fan in the world right there. Oh. The one that left that comment. That's my mom.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, my mom was on earlier too.
I saw the last name.
So sweet.
2 of our attendees sent in questions, and only 2 of you. So you both are winners for a new Denis Wick mouthpiece. I won't say full names to keep anonymity, but believe that is Gracie and Sophia. So congratulations. I'll be in touch with you. Thank you for sending us your questions. Like I said, I would like to be able to do this once every month, or probably more like once every quarter. So you'll probably be hearing from me again, inviting you to another discussion. It probably won't be so general as this one. We'll probably focus on one area of playing or networking or whatever. But this has been really enjoyable for me, and I hope for all of you as well. Download the Denis Wick app so you can get more involved with you can find out more about the artists. You have my email address to contact me with any questions. I wish all of you the best of luck and your careers and whatever you're planning on doing. And I look forward to seeing you all again. Have a great evening.